Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to Enhance International Group's 11th in a series of webinars on building and evolving resilient enterprise. Thank you for taking the time to attend, especially in light of the continued coronavirus pandemic. We hope all your family are safe and sound there. My name is Jim Vries, founder of Enhance International Group. We're a group of about 20 plus consultants, consultancy companies, and some software as a service providers. Since March, our webinars have focused on topics including risk and resiliency, risk appetite, agility, supply chain and enterprise, risk management, the W recovery and 3 Rs in the post-COVID world, which we call respond, recover, and renew. We also covered establishing the building blocks to create an agile, resilient enterprise. And we got into cybersecurity in one of our webinars and how that can be proactively addressed using agile. And then we got into how to find new products, new products for your strategy, especially in these uncertain times. And then we delved into artificial intelligence and how to create a resilient enterprise. And the last webinar that we had was how to create a visible, resilient digital ecosystem, which we call RDE. That was a very good webinar. Highly recommend. All these webinars are free. They're on our website, consultingeig.com. Feel free to access and download them at any time. Our next webinar next week will be accelerating resilient product ideation. In this post-COVID world, we're restricted and we still need to be innovative. How do we get all the parties together? How do we visit customers? How do we have those type of brainstorming events when we're all on the in some kind of a webinar or Zoom meeting? So we'll cover that. We'll cover some practical use cases of artificial intelligence in another webinar. We'll get into OCR and ethnography. We'll cover Industry 4.0. A lot of topics coming. So pretty exciting. Again, our past webinars are free, and you're welcome to download those. Today's webinar is on rapid skills development that Dr. Greg and I have been working on for the past few months here. And Greg found this very good fact that 92% of executives believe that workers lack the needed skills. 9 out of 10 executives feel that way. And every executive I've spoken to has felt that way. So maybe the exemplars are the ones who have all the right workers, everybody else is scurrying. So obviously this fundamental impedes rapid change and challenges our resiliency and regenerative efforts, causing employers to struggle with the hiring and internally certifying qualified candidates. So how do we do this? How do we move forward? So Greg, who's going to lead us for most of the webinar, I want to introduce Greg. I've known Greg for about 15 years now, and really been my pleasure. So Greg, a few words of introduction, please.
Sure. Welcome. A lot of people have known me for my abilities in the statistical area and Six Sigma, total quality, things like that. And this seems to be kind of different for me, but actually it's something I've been dealing with and interested in since the early 2000s. I had a company called Employee Dynamics, and that particular company was looked into metrics for looking at how to better assess employees' accomplishments in work. So it's something I've been interested in for a long time. And this came about because of the COVID virus and the fact that there's this large need, or will be a large need, coming forward in terms of having people that are skilled in obviously various skills that they're going to need to do these new jobs that will be out there. And this is one of those things that we're at a turning point where we really don't have a lot of people that are very highly skilled. We don't seem to be teaching skills very much, and certainly it's tough to get skills training unless you get it on your own or through experience. So Should I move on?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Trying to get to move the slide.
We'll move for you. There we go.
There we are. Okay. The agenda for today is going to really be focused on two areas, why and what, in terms of skills. And what I mean by that, first of all, we'll talk about why work is changing. What's changing about work? What do we need to focus on skills? How the workforce environment is changing. We're going to talk about the skills gap that exists today and the fact that it's more of an opportunity that we're looking for, and then an approach that we've come up with called rapid skills development in terms of addressing this. So there's people talking about needing skills, but we're actually talking about a process that goes and talks about how to actually do that. So let's see if this will work here. There we go. First thing that would important, I think, to look at is the societal need for work. And work is critical to the way people think and feel about themselves, and certainly to society in general. And it isn't just about having a job, but people are looking for the right job that gives them a sense of direction, provides guidance, value, money, achieves goals, respect, and assists society in general. And these are things that we find that more and more are difficult to attain, the right job. And for some of us that have been in the workforce for many years, we can tell you that we certainly have been through right jobs and jobs that were not right. And again, when you're not on a right job, or you're not in a job that you feel that you're making a contribution, it's tough to come to work every day or even work every day at this point. Most jobs have been listed, presented in terms of responsibilities, requirements, and duties and tasks. And that seems to have worked for a long period of time, but the problem is it doesn't really tell how that job is done. We know what the job is. We probably know why there is a job, but we really don't know how the job is done. And that's the skill part of it that we're going to be talking about. One thing that we do know is close to half of Generation Z, the real young ones, and certainly millennials themselves report that they are stressed out at work, or stressed out with work, you could say. 67% of the total workforce feels disengaged, underutilized, no connection to the work or loyalty to the organization. And this has been true according to the Stafford Social and Innovation Review for 18 years. So is this something that we can expect in the future? Is this the way has it always been? Has it always been this way? I don't think it has. And that's because work has changed and is changing over time. Generally speaking, if you look at the way work has changed, we can begin very early on, prehistoric days, work really had to do with survival. It was very simple. If you didn't work, if you didn't find food, you didn't eat, you didn't live. It was a very simple approach. But as society came about, starting about 5,000 years ago, all of that changed. And essentially, society now began to look at work in large projects. People built the pyramids, and they built the pyramids for the sole reason of the fact that they did it as monuments to themselves, but it was also to show what they could do. Interestingly enough, the pyramids built 3,000-4,000 years ago cannot be built today because we've lost those skills. And skills began to become more and more specific, more and more complex with time. And into the Middle Ages, skills then became something that was a driver of society. And you have, if I get this to pop up here for me. You had the trade skills come up in the Middle Ages, and they were the first group to actually incorporate what needed to be skills. That is, they put together a system that gave people the experience and guidance in order to develop from a novice all the way to a craftsperson. That is, basically be fully competent in that particular skill. And those skills were used to do all kinds of things from farming to building buildings to essentially running the society in general. But with the Renaissance came a period of time where education becomes important. And we see more and more of the wealthy now becoming educated, no longer being worried about what guild that they knew or what trade that they knew, but becoming very educated. And you see the very end of the skills portion at that time with the building of these great monuments, cathedrals in Europe and elsewhere. And those monuments are something, again, that are something we couldn't build today. They didn't use a computer. They used only their skill, and those skills are impossible to duplicate today. Now we get to the modern age in terms of machines and mass production and the industrial age. That changed it as well, because now we have the introduction of education for the masses and technology that comes in, particularly technology today, which is the largest driver today. And that's causing another whole change in terms of society as well. The driver today in the information age here really is changing society in such a way that we went from a very simple approach to skills to now a very complex approach. And in fact, when you're talking about AI, you're talking about, I just was looking at or reading about robotization, again, in terms of the fact that you're going to need highly skilled people to work with these machines in order to essentially get the most from them. And those are the kind of things that we're beginning to require, but yet we really don't have anyone that I can see, or not very many, out there addressing these types of skills that are needed. So the skills are becoming more complex and will continue that way, but we seem to lag behind the capability of preparing people to take on those skills. Now we know that every job has a reason or purpose for existence, and that's very important, obviously, but it's more than just that. We also know that with jobs or work, if you want to put it that way, is we have this whole idea of achievement. We have the idea of uncertainty and success, and I'll explain that in just a second. Achievement is the accomplishment of work-related outcomes. And that is oftentimes when, and I can use only myself in this case, when I've gone in to take a job, I was told what my duties would be, what my responsibilities would be, but no one ever took the time to tell me what was expected of me. That is, what was I going to produce? And how would that be judged? That production that I did, how would that be judged? So without that, it was very difficult to assess and to prepare to be successful. Now, I was, because again, eventually you figure those things out, what you really need and want, but in reality, that type of information was not something that was easily provided. And not only that, when it's not provided, you end up creating a great deal of uncertainty. And the uncertainty is the inability to describe or visualize, see, to experience that success. And that's going to cause a lot of indecision. It's going to cause mistakes and errors as well. Because as the uncertainty goes up, because the complexity is going up of the job, you're going to have more and more opportunity to not do that job correctly, or more and more opportunity for errors and mistakes. In reality, what we need is we need to be able to have a system that addresses those necessary outcomes to be filled and that provides information how to do that so that the employee can be successful. Is your company prepared for the workforce changes brought about by the changing nature of work, the new workforce, or this new technology that's coming out? And what they're saying is, in this report by Deloitte, is the fact that probably in many cases, most are not. As Jim mentioned about the 92% that says we needed, of executives that say we need to have these skills, I think you can see that we're saying, no, we're not prepared. And yet this is coming. It's coming at us very rapidly. So work obviously is changing and will continue to change. And of course, it affects all of society, all of business itself. There's no doubt about that. One of the big changes is this human-machine interface that I mentioned about. And it's not just artificial intelligence, it's robotics, it's machine learning. You can have called by different names. In reality, what it's going to be, it's going to require that the human work with the machine. The machine obviously work with the human as well, but that's going to require a different set of skills than we now have. Generally, the skills that people are learning, they're learning through education and training, and those skills are, or that learning and training is useful, but it doesn't always turn into a knowledge of the skills that are needed. In fact, what we can say is that employees need to know three things: what is expected of them, why they're doing what they're doing, all right, so they can agree to and meet that purpose, and how. Big concern is the how, not so much the why and the what. I mean, they are concerns as well, but the how is what we're talking about in this case. Our conversation today, though, is going to be trying to look at the what and why more so than the how. We'll be talking about the how in the future. Forbes said, and of course, good magazine, business magazine, that it says by 2022, no less than 54% of all employees will require significant or upskilling. I'll talk about what and upskilling means. It's going to be an important statistic, all right, is to move to that point. Now, we're living in a post-COVID-19 world, or at least we're hopefully coming near the end of COVID-19. Who knows what's after that? But the idea is organizations are definitely operating in a more lean fashion, fewer employees, longer days, more work being assigned to employees. And it seems that there's more and more of that every day as some whole functions in many organizations are disappearing. One of those types of functions is human resources. More and more of that's being done by the individual employee. And that's added extra work on top of their normal set of daily activities. Before we go any further, let's make sure we understand what we're talking about when we talk about skills. A skill is the ability and the capacity, all right, and achieved basically or acquired through a deliberate, systematic, and sustained effort, all right, to smoothly and adaptively carry out complex activities or job functions, which may involve things like ideation, ideas, cognitive, technical, and or interpersonal skills. All these things are important, and therefore, if these things do involve parts of the job, then knowing not just how, but what they are that's required are going to be important. For complex tasks, which is what we're getting into, generally a skills approach seems to be more successful. I don't think any of you that fly would want a pilot to just be book learned before they get into the plane and fly it. I think the same thing is, I don't think any of you want to have surgery done where the surgeon has just been through 4 years of medical school and is out the door ready to do surgery. I think the same thing's true of any executive position as well. It's very difficult to come into those positions without having set developed skills. Where do you get those skills from? Experience is very helpful in terms of those skills, in getting them, but those skills are not something you're going to learn from education. Another thing, of course, is to make sure that once you have these skills, there's a way of having some proof that you can accomplish these skills, some competency in those as well. And then to make sure those employees are the most competent are the ones who are most rewarded for that competency. Right now, most systems that do evaluation of employees seem to be focused more on opinion or feelings, more of what I think of the employee than what the employee actually does. I think that's getting better, but I still think that's where it lies in most cases. And I think most people would agree that there is definitely a skills gap that now exists and getting wider as well. And if you love statistics, there's some statistics here for you to look at, for sure. And on either the right or left-hand side, whichever one you want to look at, but basically all the statistics are telling you is that we need to be better skilled. And even in terms of looking at critical skills, and in essence like communication and creativity, critical thinking and so on, most executives are saying that basically employees are lacking in these skills, soft skills, not just the hard skills, but the soft skills as well. And certainly for most higher level jobs, the soft skills are going to be more important. And again, I think that number is far greater in terms of people not having those skills or not having the professed competency in those skills than this particular number says. But this is the number that was being reported, so this is what we're talking about. But I think that's even a very high, much higher number. And not only that, but it affects everything from profitability to growth opportunities because people don't have the skills. Not only that, but quick turnaround and resiliency and regeneration that we're talking about here as well, that EIG talks about. It's going to be critical to be able to quickly reskill people. If they have a particular set of skills and they need to be reskilled, we have to do that very rapidly. And so that's part of it too, even if they are well skilled. And if you look at what organizations are looking at here in terms of skills coming out of school, you can see that most of these skills, again, are things people want. You see them in job descriptions, but they don't, tell you what they mean. That is, they don't tell you what are the outcomes of these. And oftentimes they don't tell you how they are going to help the job recruiting part of the job, how to actually accomplish these. The recruiting, I should say, that's not the word I'm looking for. The recruit itself, basically to accomplish these. But all of these things are skills that are needed for, particularly for executives, managers, leaders for sure, in this case, and yet, how do they get all of them at this point in time? How do you lead? You know, do you take a leadership course, or do you maybe get a degree in leadership? And is that enough? I worked through a lot of people who got degrees in leadership, doctorate degrees, and I would be hard-pressed for some of them to want me to lead me to the buffet at the next restaurant I go to. So again, the problem is you can be educated in something but not skilled. On the positive side, you know, things are changing. That's the positive side. There are businesses that are, in fact, spending the money and the time to begin to reskill their employees. And that's good, but it's going to have to be more than just a few. It's going to have to be a large number. The idea of reskilling means that you're essentially taking a person that's skilled and training them into a new skill. So reskilling assumes there's already a set of skills that they have, that you're basically giving them a new set of skills, or you're at least training them in at least one new skill to be a reskilled. And there are certainly people that can be reskilled at this point. Reskilling is something you want to do, particularly after you have people that have been skilled. If you reskill them, you can do it very rapidly. One of the things that we're going to talk about is the fact that we believe we can reskill people in a matter of a week or two in terms of the type of job that they're in. I don't think you can reskill a CEO in a week or two, but certainly you can reskill many workers at that point in time in that period. But it assumes that they've already have some set of skills of which have been acknowledged. And reskilling doesn't necessarily require just educational, formal learning. It can be done in a non-formal learning way. It can be done with experiential learning, or it can be done in a very informal way in terms of essentially, I don't want to say teaching, I want to be careful about saying that word, but in terms of providing them a new set of skills. Now, traditionally, education and training have provided most of the skills up to now, certainly the education. And what they actually have provided was the opportunity to acquire new knowledge. And that's very useful to acquire new knowledge, but skills not only require the knowledge, but they're also going to apply the knowledge. So you're beginning to see more of a focus, not just on acquiring knowledge, but on applying knowledge as well, and the values and attitudes that go along with that. Something that I feel is very important is called the learning pendulum. And the learning pendulum swings back and forth in terms of how people are learning. It has moved both in terms of, let me fill this in here. All right, easier to see and talk about if I fill it in. Basically, it moves in terms of the acquiring knowledge piece, the educational piece, and the acquiring and the applying knowledge piece as well. Now, education provides an extremely great foundation, and some fields are going to require a great deal of education to provide that foundation. In the fields I've been in, I've needed the education. When I went to school as a meteorologist, essentially I learned the science in meteorology, the physics of the weather, of the atmosphere. However, no one ever spent a single day talking about how to predict the weather. That was a skill. Those kind of skills had to come from application of the knowledge. You needed the knowledge, but you had to apply it. And the skill of being able to predict the weather and being relatively correct with that prediction had to be because you had that educational piece, that foundational piece in place. But education is not going to provide necessarily and teach skills. Oftentimes those skills have to come with some form of experience. So again, the important part is to remember that we seem to be moving back towards more of an application or a learning piece rather than so much an educational piece or training piece. The learning piece is going to be, seems to be more important because they need to learn. That is, they need to apply whatever knowledge they have. So I'm not saying education is, we need to replace education. What I'm saying is education is not enough. Essentially, it's not providing everything that you need. And that the skills are what's really going to dictate the success of the person. Another form of this is upskilling. And the upskilling piece here refers to the fact that where I think we are in most cases, we're generally dealing with a person that's not been skilled, not skills trained or experienced in this case. And we're basically starting almost from ground zero in terms of a skill itself. A lot of people are at this point when it comes to skills, particularly when you're talking about a new technology coming in. The technology that's the human-machine interface is at this point. I doubt very few people have really the skills to do this, so they're going to have to be taught those skills or experience those skills or a combination of both in order to become fully competent in those skills. So I believe that that's where most people are. They're not at the reskilling piece, they're at the upskilling piece. So that's how these are words that they use in terms of upskilling being new, reskilling being just essentially obtaining a new skill, but already having skills to build on. But if you're going to change the organization to be able to do upskilling, it's going to have to be a strategic initiative, for sure. It's going to have to be based upon a different approach than what we have now. It's going to require culture change and training, and definitely a number of instances of experiential learning in order to get these people up to a set skill. Now, if you're basically trying to get someone to a skill point, you're not going to reach, excuse me, 100% at one time. You're going to bring them up to a certain point, all right, let them go out into the workforce, practice with some guidance, and then bring them back up to proficiency at 100%. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get to that and we talk about the actual rapid process that we're talking about. And when I talk about rapid skills deployment or development over here in this case, and I use both words as well, essentially it's one of those, it's a process and a method really that is going to essentially be part of this development, the capability to able upskill and to reskill as well. And we're going to do that by creating actually we've got 5 different, got to 7 different ways of actually doing this, all right? First of all, we're going to talk about, in order to do this, you're going to need some sort of leadership, and you can call this person anything you want. I'm calling them a skills architect. They could be anything, all right, in terms of you want to call them whatever you want to call them. But to me, essentially, you're basically like an architect that's building a building. You are doing the very same thing with skills. It's about building those skills. And that person is going to be responsible for the design and operations of this. And they're going to do that with a support team. Oftentimes, the support team is going to be people that are experienced or expert in a particular job or jobs. To require a skills base is also going to create an inventory of skills, and we'll create a repository that basically has the skills inventory enclosed within it, meaning the fact that if we need to reskill or if we need to upskill in a new job, a new technology, it could be that 80 to 90% of something we already have, that someone has those skills, much easier to reskill that than to try to teach them away from ground zero. And we require that all critical jobs, operations, and functions be profiled in terms of this skills-based and linked to the job outcomes. In essence, what we have, which we can talk about at our next time in terms of doing this, if there's a next time, we're going to talk about the fact is that there's a job analysis. We use a job analysis template, and we have a skills base. So basically every job is looked at in such a way it's examined using a template, and from that, once we know what that job, what we expect of that job and how that job is done in order to maximize efficiency and effectiveness, then we can start talking about those kinds of skills being cataloged and inventoried. The skills are going to be monitored for competency, and that's our performance monitor that we're going to use. And the idea being that once you develop a set of skills, even basic skills, to introduce more complex products and technologies, you'll be able to take those basic skills and build upon them. Because people will be used to now looking at a job from a skills basis rather than looking at a job from a descriptive basis. Jim, did you want to do this, or did you want me to do this?
You go ahead and lead it. If everyone can just log in either method on your cell phone or on the internet, as we mentioned before, the polev.com/GregSchlegel910, or just simply text 2233 to that number and then type in Greg Schlegel 910 in there. You'll have access to it, and then you can just vote.
All right, well,
and Greg will bring you through the question.
This was an actual job listing. It's an actual job listing that exists in LinkedIn right now. It was one that's something that I'm interested in, or I could be interested in, an analyst. So I picked something that I knew, let's put it that way. And I went down and looked at the job listing and say, all right, are they talking about the job in terms of experience, job description, titles, roles, or skills. And in this particular case, they had both a descriptive piece to the job and a qualification and skills piece to the job. They had both pieces in this job. And one of the things that they mentioned in this was in the skills portion, they said one skill they were looking for is that the person would speak English and Spanish fluently. French and Portuguese can be a plus. Now, my concern is, how would you read that and interpret that? If we're talking about a job as being something that we know what it is we're looking for, what we're in essence, what are the outcomes that we're going to produce, how we're going to produce them, and what we're going to produce, how would one address something like this? When someone says, speaks fluently English and Spanish, that's pretty common and clear, but French and Portuguese can be a plus. What does that mean? A, is that you're fluent in English and Spanish and other languages? Some knowledge of? Fluent in all 4 languages? Fluent in English and Spanish only? Required to fluently speak English and Spanish? Extremely interested in learning French and Portuguese? If not fluent, not exactly sure what the statement implies, or you have another interpretation than this. How would you think about that? Obviously very important to the prospective employer, but how does one interpret what's being said? And if one can't interpret what's being said in a job description or job posting, how can you possibly put your name in for it unless you just say, oh, well, let's give it a chance?
So we only have a few folks on the phone.
Okay.
I guess my question is, are you able to vote? Dave, can you vote?
I was trying from the web browser. It's saying that it can't find that name, and I was just texting in right now.
All right. Just give it one more minute. Maybe use the text version.
Okay.
Thank you. Technology.
G or, let's see.
Yeah, choose
Love it.
G. Yeah, choose G. See what happens.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
say that again.
I'm kidding. I was kidding.
Greg, right? SCH.
Yeah, it's at the top here. Greg Schlegel.
Yeah, 0910.
No, not 0, just 910.
910. Good God, it is, isn't it? Pay attention, let me freaking do this for a living.
I should have said, I'm mentioning the date could have messed you up, especially a programmer.
There we go. I'm in.
You're in there. All right. When you vote, we'll reveal your vote.
We could have asked him and just,
We're trying to get the technology to work. The other gentleman, if they can vote, that'd be wonderful.
yeah, I got some messages here. People can't get in, so.
Tell them to do it without the 0.
All right. There we go. So we'll show the responses.
Okay, so that's, it's a question mark. Am I fluent in English and Spanish, or should I know something else, or you know, or again, I would read that as almost 50-50 shot. Well, I'm good in these 2 languages. I'll give it a try, and maybe they'd hire me. What we're saying is it's very poorly described, very poorly written, and this is not uncommon to see in job descriptions these days. So if you're not being if you're not honestly being clear, it's very difficult to know what kind of person you're going to get for this. I think we have one after this too, don't we?
Yes, we do.
This was in the skills and qualifications part. All right. Same thing again. And here's one probably we all have: provide assistance on all design projects. That's what it said. That was the qualification or the skill. Provide assistance on all design projects. Now, what does this information convey? If you read that, provide assistance on all design projects, what would that mean? A, you're going to be involved in all the design projects? B, whatever assistance is needed for all design projects? Are you going to be kind of an expert consulting on these design projects? Not exactly sure what this means? Or do you have another interpretation? I understand what the word provide means, and I understand design projects. But what do you mean by assistance? If you look at this, you see this is open for someone to come in and say, you're not doing this. There's really no way to measure competency here. Yeah, that's the way I would read it. That's the way I would read it, all right? And that's a bit scary, I would think. You know, because what if it's a design project that had to do with something totally outside your field? Are you still going to provide assistance to it? Don't know. All right. So thank you. But do you see that what the problem is here in terms of the fact that today's job skills, and this is on LinkedIn, this was just put on, excuse me, I think it was just put on the end of August. So it's not like it's something that is not new. It is, and yet it seems to me to be extremely confusing. And obviously, if you're trying to look for a person's capabilities, confusing them is probably not the best thing to do.
It's almost scary because you're reading this, and the other person who answered had a completely different interpretation of it, and yet both of us may have applied for this position and potentially could take a job or get hired for a job that had a totally different interpretation of what we even thought it was. That's just, wow.
Wow. Because it's not a skill.
No.
If it was a skill, it'd be very easy, because skills are written in such a way. First of all, they're written always using skill verbs. You know, they're written so that they're clear. This is not clear at all. It's not a skill, and it's, I suppose, what experience would you ever get providing assistance? I don't know. That certainly sounds like a lot of jobs I had, so. I should read you the one I had at where we worked, all right? You'd find that to be interesting, all right? Because it didn't exist. That was one thing that was fun about it. Jim, you want me to turn this back over to you?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Greg. So we're going to, oh no, you got one more slide. One more slide.
Okay. Sorry about that. In terms of the rapid skills deployment, there's really three pieces to it. One is the actual process. That is the process of examining the job, analyzing it, creating a skills profile, to either upskill or reskill the job. That is, upskilling is going to take a lot longer because there's going to have to be some heavy-duty experiential experience put into it. Reskilling can be done very rapidly. So again, if someone's going to do this and they're going to have to start from ground zero, we basically tell them to start at a position, basically use a pilot job to see how something like this would work, because it's going to maybe a little extra work with upskilling. But we do have a way of upskilling and reskilling that's accelerated. So even though I understand I'm saying upskilling is a little more difficult, and it is, we do have an accelerated approach to it where we can do it very rapidly. So that's the first part of the rapid skills deployment. The second part is, in order to have some sort of competency, we have created an apprentice system, much like they existed in the Middle Ages. In the apprentice system here, you can climb a ladder in the apprentice system from novice all the way to expert. And essentially what you're doing is, as you're going along, you're gaining more experience, you're gaining a more depth understanding of the skill itself or skills, more experience with the skills, to eventually reaching a point where you can teach this, and after that you can actually become a full-fledged expert. We would expect that most organizations would be lucky to have an expert if they have one, but we would certainly have a number of people that would be able to be teaching this because they've reached a skill level and an experience level with the job that they can teach others. And again, it isn't so much being experienced with a particular skill, it'd be experience with skills themselves. And finally is deployment. This is going to take it's going to take the organization time and effort in order to make this happen. But my feeling is, and my point is with this, is I can talk about that and you can say, yeah, everything requires some sort of deployment and planning, strategy, culture, but this has to be given because this is all on the way. You can look at it and say, we're not going to do it, or you may not be in business if you say that, because this is going to happen. And again, the idea is get up front with it, and that's something that Jim's going to talk about with, is the idea a little bit more about the strategic element of this and the culture element as well.
Okay. So excellent lead in for this. So for EIG, we look at two wheels here connected by a chain. So we have our strategy wheel and our execution wheel. And as you see in the strategy wheel, we have our vision, brand, intrinsic value, and operating structure. So what we're focusing today on is that third part of that gear, the operating structure, the skills that we need to get the work done. So, if these wheels aren't in sync, the company's going to get derailed from from a large perspective, from an overall entire perspective. And these links or wheels are inexplicably linked and in sync. So, developing an agile and resilient mindset will ensure that we have a successful journey to where we're going. And of course, movement is driven by the pedaling of the front gear, the strategy. So we're driving that. The front gear controls the speed, the balance, the momentum of the bicycle. And ideally, the front moves at a slower rotation speed than the rear gear because it's planned, right? So we're planning our execution. And with a solid strategy, we'll have many execution rotation cycles. So with good skills aligned to a vision and strategy and your intrinsic value of your company, you'll be aligned to driving your bicycle. And our old friend Albert Einstein says that, life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you need to keep moving. So there's a lot of good analogies there. So a solid strategy provides a clear roadmap, vision of what we want in the future to elevate the intrinsic value of the company. It's in that third stage again of the strategy wheel, informing that operating structure that creates those skills or identifies the skills required that are clearly identified to achieve the company's identity. And this is where the workforce development and skill definitions should start. And Greg outlines the job, the apprentice, the deployment very well. It provides that roadmap to ensure that we have the right people aligned to the right job and the right skill aligned to that skill to the company to drive that company's identity, to align to the vision and sustainability. So the other thing that we wanted to talk a little bit about is on execution. And we talk about an end-to-end vision, what we're driving for the company. The organizational empowerment is we're empowering the employees, and that leadership needs to empower the employees to have the right skills to achieve the vision. And then with that, we can then move down to the visibility. How do we drive visibility and make sure that people are on board with stakeholder analytics and value optimization and we start getting into the buzzwords that we use today about agility, risk management, and sustained margin growth. But without the organization empowering the employee with the right skills, none of this is going to work. So we talk about driving visibility and operational risk management and enterprise risk and resiliency. But again, the foundation are these skills. And there are a number of software as a service solutions to help us throughout this entire journey. We'll talk about one of those in a few minutes here. So as we're coaching to achieve success for each of the employees, there's 5 steps to successful implementation. And first, we don't want to overwhelm the person. We want to create a hierarchy of tasks, start with a simple, critical task, prioritize them, and make sure that they have that foundation and demonstrate the proficiency that they need to do. And then a lot of hands-on experience, as Greg said, experientials. We need to explain the practice to achieve the outcome, evaluate those consequences, and learn from the mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. More the lean mentality, fail fast, so we can be successful. So we understand the why in the impact of things, just like everybody had to touch the hot stove and burn your finger because we just didn't believe it was hot. So the third success factor is, help only those requested and needed. So, provide guides, checklists, let the folks learn themselves. And the best teacher is a teacher that, you learn the best when you teach. So the quicker you can get to teaching, the more you learn and the more it's intrinsic in you. And then provide that safety net, no threats, focus on the process, personal responsibility solutions and value. So encourage the proficiency, eliminate the excuses. And when we talk about excuses here, excuses on why people can't do their work. So that's the ownership of management. We need to remove those roadblocks to make the employee be at their best. And then remind the employee that they are important, skilled, and valued member of the team. They are vital and needed. And we want them to meet their maximum potential. It's very important. Very often we don't look at the employee. We look at them to do a left to right activity. Really, we're looking at the employee to meet their maximum potential. If they're not able to do that in their job, maybe they're in the wrong job. And it's our responsibility as managers to make sure that we find them the right place so that they can drive to their maximum potential. Greg?
Well, I mentioned about in the idea of apprenticeship and in terms of that, and basically just without going through that slide here, except to say that the 89% of respondents who took a survey here thought that corporate apprenticeship programs could alleviate the skills gap. All right, I think that's very important. And from that, okay, there we go. All right, we have a system here in terms of RSD. Again, we have a 4-stage system of apprenticeship, starting out with beginners or neophytes, if you want to call them that, all the way up to master experts. And essentially what happens is we talk about how long it would take someone to meet this category, both from an experience, a reskilling approach, and upskilling. We see it as new candidates, that's the upskill approach. The experienced candidates is the reskill approach. So we can believe this can be done relatively quickly, even with people that have experience, to train them into a new, and I want to use the word train, but again, there's not a lot of good words necessarily to use, but to give them the experiences, the guidance that they need in order to move to a new skill or a new set of skills in this case. Obviously, if there are more skills to learn, that's going to take a little longer period of time to do that than it would be if I were just teaching them one new skill. All right. So the idea being that you can reach a stage of qualification within a number of weeks. The fact that you're fully qualified to and fully competent in order to do the job at that point in time. And if you want to go beyond that into the expert stage or the master stage, so to speak, you can do that as well. And essentially, from the rapid skills deployment of the beginner status, we have an 80-20 rule that we use, and that is that once the employee can accomplish 80% of the tasks competently, or say that they have reached that first level. All right, that the beginner level at that point in time, they have to complete everything competitively, but in terms of proficiently. All right, I can use that word too. We can use that in order to become qualified. They have to become proficient. That may take longer. It's a little harder to spell out how long that would be. In many cases, it'll be 4 to 8 weeks for them to become proficient after they first they go through the beginner phase. Now, after that, it's much more difficult to say how long it'll take to achieve any kind of expert status. That really depends upon the person. It depends upon their capability and so on. But it will take time in order to do that. But inevitably, you can get to the point where you have a number of individuals in the organization that have the skill to be able to teach others new skills. And even if they're not necessarily totally expert in those skills, they can provide that information. Part of what we're talking about here as well, this is the qualified stage, and here we say they're going to be able to do things function at least 90% without any coaching or guidance. In the early stages, there's going to be a lot of coaching and guidance, but eventually they reach a stage where they can pretty much do everything that they need to do that job competently. And then over time, that 90% will become 100%. The other skills here, the specialist skills and the master skills, I won't get into as much because these are something you're going to have far fewer of in the organization. The idea is a person can keep moving in the organization. They can keep becoming more and more recognized for their competency in the organization. And again, they can use those skills to do other things in the organization or use them at other organizations. I mean, at this point in time. The skills are something that they're going to have and be able to take with them. It's like in the days, in the medieval times, if you were a skilled carpenter or you were a skilled candle maker or you were a skilled iron worker, in this case, if you could do all those things, those skills went with you. That's something you never lost, even if you took on additional skills. We also look at competency in 4 levels as well. We have a novice competency all the way up to a master level competency. So in essence, it's not just 4 levels, but it's 4 levels times 4 in terms of the competencies. So you could be at a competency level, a novice competency level, or intermediate competency level would not necessarily just be someone who is qualified, but meets a different set of criteria. Let's skip that question, all right, because I think it's getting late here. All right, and Jim, you may want to do the productive index, and I think that we just have the one more slide.
Yeah, so we are running a bit late here. It's 101. If you can stay on, great. If not, we understand. The predictive index is a great way of finding the right employees for the right job. As we noted many times, we rarely get the right talent in the right place, and they have some very interesting tools to get that done in a very quick and efficient manner. And then they work with you from a business strategy perspective and execution perspective, aligning those skills with what you need in your organization. So it's more than putting a posting out there. As we discussed earlier, it's about aligning it to your business and this where you need focus in your business and what's most important today to drive your strategy wheel. the way you want it, and so that you can execute properly. Just a quick note about COVID-19. We talked about that. We're in this oscillating period of time where we don't really know where the new supply-demand balance is going to be. We don't know where the new normal is going to be. We don't know what type of skills we need more or less of. We do know one thing, and that is, from a high-tech perspective, there's a large, significant gap in AI type of skills, and that's the hottest area right now. But there's 5 critical workforce actions to enhance the recovery. 1 is reflect on what has worked in the past. 2, recommit the workforce and well-being through a focused workplace. Re-engage and redeploy the workforce. And 4, rethink the work in the workforce. And 5, reboot. So went through that fast, but that just gives you a high level on some critical workforce actions that you can take right away to help understand where you're going to, or how you're going to address this imbalance that we are going through today, and will continue to go through as we find our new norm. Greg?
Last slide here is the rapid skills development or deployment maturity model that we go through. And this is basically the stages that we would talk about in terms of working with an organization. And first thing we do is assess where they are. We'd work with, just pilot with them, basically show them how to do this with one critical job skill. Next, we talk about implementation, how to make this work on a smaller and then larger basis. That would be in the integrate phase, is more of a larger base in terms of making this work, and finally optimize the process itself, where you're actually getting all the benefits of the process. And this is essentially our maturity model that we'll be looking at for this. Some of these we've talked about, some elements we haven't talked about. And one last thing, are you ready to start upskilling your workforce? If you're interested, we have a white paper on this. Just let us know if you're interested. We'll get you a copy of this, which goes obviously into a little bit more detail than what we presented here on the slides.
So thanks everyone for joining us. We'll be having a webinar next week on launching resilient products and services in the post-COVID world, and a number of other webinars coming up, as well as we have some pre-recorded webinars that are available on the EIG website. So thanks for everybody for coming in, and we wish you all the best and stay safe.
Thank you.